Welcome back. Welcome to the deep dive. We are jumping right into a topic today that, frankly, it kind of messes with your head a little bit.
It really does.
Right. So I want you to imagine a paradox with me for a second. How did a literal miracle material,
And people really thought of it as a miracle.
absolutely, something that actively saved millions of lives from burning cities, how did that morph into one of the deadliest industrial disasters in human history?
It is a massive contradiction, and the really unsettling part is why this same material is still hiding in plain sight in our environment right now.
Exactly. And to unpack all of this,
Because we already thought it was a pretty big problem.
yeah, we did. But the mission for this deep dive is to shatter this comfortable illusion that most of us just, walk around with. We tend to assume asbestos is a solved problem, right?
Right, just relic of the past that regulators banned, and we all safely moved on.
But today, we're going to decode the fascinating chemistry behind it, the corporate cover-ups that kept it in use, and the bizarre legal loopholes that keep it woven into the fabric of our daily lives today.
Because we are looking at a material that is fundamentally perfect for industrial use and simultaneously perfectly destructive to human biology.
If we go way back to the ancient Greeks, around the 2nd century AD, they had this golden lantern.
Oh, yeah, the inextinguishable
Modern
lantern.
historians, and this lantern supposedly burned for an entire year without the flame ever going out.
Right.
The wick was considered magic, just totally inextinguishable. But the twist the video reveals is that the Greeks didn't invent some advanced wick technology.
They literally just dug it up out of the dirt.
Just dug it up. If you were walking around back then, you might see this fluffy, almost cotton-like stuff poking out of the ground. It looks like you could easily use it to start a campfire.
But it doesn't burn.
It doesn't burn at all because it's actually a rock.
What's fascinating here is the atomic structure of that rock. When we zoom all the way in and break down this mineral, the core building block is what called a silica tetrahedron.
Okay, a silica tetrahedron.
Right, so you have a silicon atom surrounded by 4 oxygen atoms. And think of oxygen as an atomic bully in this scenario.
A bully? How so?
Well, it wants electrons much more than the silicon does. It's a property called being highly electronegative. So the oxygen aggressively pulls the shared electrons closer to itself.
Resulting in a super tight grip between the atoms.
Incredibly tight. It creates this immensely strong, stable, pyramid-shaped electrostatic bond.
But wait, a lot of rocks have silica in them, right? Like quartz is mostly silica, clay has it.
Yeah.
So why doesn't a handful of clay turn into fluffy, fireproof cotton?
That's a great point. More than 90% of the Earth's minerals are made of this stuff, so you are spot on. Asbestos is unique because of how those atomic pyramids link together.
How do they link?
They form into a flat sheet, and then they bond to a second sheet made of magnesium atoms. But the atomic spacing between those two sheets doesn't perfectly align.
Like trying to zip up a jacket where the teeth are just slightly different sizes.
That is a great way to picture it. There is immense structural tension. That mismatch causes the bonded sheets to actually curl up onto themselves. They form microscopic scroll-like tubes.
Wow.
And because of that tight atomic bully bond we talked about, those tiny tubes are virtually indestructible by heat. They stay completely stable up to around 600 degrees Celsius.
So you pull this rock from the ground, and it naturally curls into tiny flexible fibers. It's literally a rock you can weave.
Exactly. And when you weave it, the fibers form a tangled microscopic maze. If you introduce extreme heat or a flame, that heat has to pass incredibly slowly across countless microscopic contact points through the air gaps.
It completely halts the spread of fire.
It really does.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, especially when you look at how human history collided with this rock. Picture the 1800s.
A very flammable time.
Super flammable. We have explosive urban growth, cities are densely packed, and almost everything is built out of wood. People are cooking with open flames, lighting their homes with gas lamps and candles. It was an absolute tinderbox.
Just waiting for a spark.
Right. The Great Fire of New York City in 1835. It engulfed a third of a mile of Manhattan and destroyed nearly 700 buildings. Embers would just float from roof to roof, setting entire neighborhoods ablaze.
London, Chicago, Tokyo, major cities were routinely burning to the ground. It was a global crisis of the industrial age.
Then, in 1868, a 21-year-old guy named Henry Ward Johns enters the picture. He knows about this woven fireproof fabric, but at the time, only the long asbestos fibers could be spun into thread. The short fibers were just swept away as trash.
Just useless dust to them.
Exactly. So the video describes how Johns takes those short-waist fibers, goes down to his basement, and starts experimenting. He heats up hot tar in his tea kettle, smears it on cloth, presses in the waste asbestos, and literally runs the whole concoction through his wife's clothes wringer.
That is amazing.
And just like that, he invents cheap, mass-producible, fireproof roofing.
The impact of that basement invention cannot be overstated. From the late 1800s through the mid-1900s, asbestos use absolutely skyrocketed. It was integrated into the foundation of modern society.
And it worked, didn't it?
It did. To be fair to the people living through that era, it really worked. During that period, fire-related deaths dropped by an estimated 80%. Society viewed it as an absolute miracle.
A miracle that they decided belonged in literally everything. The list of products in the video is wild. They put asbestos in ironing boards. It was inside hair dryers.
Brewers even use it to filter beer.
Which is insane. There was even a brand of toothpaste that used asbestos fibers for extra polish.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And if you watch the classic movie The Wizard of Oz and see that beautiful fake snow falling on Dorothy in the poppy field,
Don't tell me.
pure asbestos. Marvel Comics even created a villain called the Asbestos Lady, who wore a fireproof asbestos bodysuit to fight the Human Torch.
That is wild. Though perhaps the most shocking example from the Veritasium investigation is the Kent Cigarettes ad campaign from the 1950s. They proudly marketed their new Micronite filter as a health breakthrough.
Drawing smoke through a health filter.
Made of asbestos.
That is just terrifying.
Specifically, those blue filters were made of chrysotolite. We need to distinguish the types of asbestos here. The vast majority of what was used commercially is called chrysotile, which has curly, somewhat flexible fibers.
Okay, the curly ones.
Right. But chrysotolite is a type of amphibole asbestos. Amphibole fibers are straight, jagged, and needle-like. Kent cigarette smokers were drawing smoke directly through a filter made of jagged amphibole needles straight into their lungs.
And smoking, that leads me to something that a woman named Nellie Kershaw. In the 1920s, she worked in a factory spinning asbestos fibers. She breathed in that dust every single day. By her early 30s, she could barely breathe at all.
Just tragic.
When she died at just 33 years old, the pathologist found that her lungs were scarred, gray, and almost blue-black. The detail that got me, when he cut into her lungs with a scalpel, it sounded like scraping against sandpaper.
Wow.
How does fluffy rock dust turn a lung into sandpaper?
It is a devastating image, and the biological mechanism behind it is essentially microscopic warfare. When you inhale those fibers, especially the jagged amphibole ones, they shoot deep into your lung tissue.
Like tiny spheres.
Exactly. And your body immediately recognizes a foreign invader and sends in macrophages. These are specialized white blood cells whose entire job is to eat, digest, and clear out debris.
So they try to eat the asbestos.
They do. But asbestos fibers are too long, too rigid, and chemically indestructible. It's like a single cell trying to swallow a sideways toothpick.
A sideways toothpick. That sounds agonizing just to picture.
On a cellular level, it is. The macrophage can't digest the fiber, so the cell basically panics. Biologists call this process frustrated phagocytosis.
Frustrated phagocytosis.
Right. The macrophage starts spewing out inflammatory chemicals and highly reactive oxygen species. This doesn't destroy the asbestos, though. Instead, it damages the surrounding lung tissue and, critically, damages the local DNA of the lung cells.
So it's basically destroying itself trying to fix the problem.
Yes. Over years, this massive accumulation of scar tissue becomes the disease known as asbestosis. Worse, those fibers can migrate all the way to the outer lining of the chest cavity. The constant irritation there triggers a rare, aggressively fatal cancer called mesothelioma.
And people were dying from this for decades while the industry just boomed.
Unfortunately, yes.
The Veritasium video mentions a doctor in the 1960s, Irving Selikoff, who finally started connecting the dots. He was running a clinic in New Jersey and seeing local asbestos factory workers coming in with severe lung scarring and mesothelioma.
And he needed data.
Right. But the factory owners absolutely refused to give him any medical records to study.
Huh?
So how did Dr. Selikoff manage to prove the link if the industry blocked his access to the data?
He had to find another data set, and he found a brilliant workaround. During World War II, thousands of shipyard workers were employed by the Navy to insulate ships with asbestos.
Okay.
Because it was wartime, all these men had undergone federal FBI background checks. Selikoff used those government records to painstakingly track down these men decades later and rebuild their medical histories from scratch.
That is incredibly clever. And the numbers he found were chilling. He proved that exposure to asbestos in the shipyards was actually deadlier than fighting in the war.
It's hard to believe.
About 8.6 out of every 1,000 servicemen were killed in combat. But 14 out of every 1,000 of those shipyard workers died from asbestos-related cancers. It was undeniable proof.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the cover-up was already decades old by the time Dr. Selikoff published his findings. The industry knew long before the 1960s.
They knew.
Oh, they knew. In 1974, an attorney named Carl Ash was digging into a company called Asbestos Manhattan. He forced them to hand over internal documents, and he received a banker's box full of files kept by their former president, Sumner Simpson, dating all the way back to the 1930s.
The Sumner-Simpson papers. What exactly was inside that box that blew the lid off the conspiracy?
Those papers revealed that in the 1930s, the biggest asbestos companies secretly hired Saranac Laboratories to conduct animal studies on the health effects of asbestos dust.
Okay, so they were testing it.
But the companies put a specific clause in the research contract stating they owned the results and could edit whatever they wanted. When the lead researcher died, the companies literally took his final manuscript and crossed out entire paragraphs.
You've got to be kidding me.
I wish I was. Any mention that asbestos caused cancer or severe illness in the animals was completely erased before the study was allowed to be published.
It makes my blood boil. Even sworn testimony from a witness recalling a meeting in the 1940s. Someone asked the president of Johns Manville, the biggest asbestos company at the time, if they would really just let their men work until they dropped dead.
And his response was?
He replied, "Yes, we save a lot of money that way." They knew exactly what they were doing.
It is purely chilling.
Okay, let's unpack this legally. Because eventually, the truth comes out, the lawsuits fled in, and the government has to step in. In 1989, the EPA finally issued a rule to phase out almost all asbestos use in the United States. You'd think that would be the end of it.
You would think so.
But in 1991, the asbestos industry sued, and they won. How did a lawsuit overturn a ban on a known, proven killer?
It came down to a regulatory technicality. The courts didn't rule that asbestos was safe. I mean, everyone acknowledged it caused cancer. But under the law at the time, the EPA had to prove that an outright ban was the least burdensome alternative to control the risk.
The least burdensome.
Yes. The court decided the EPA hadn't sufficiently explored middle ground options, like incredibly strict warning labels or partial limits. Because of that phrasing, least burdensome, the ban was essentially killed.
Which left the door wide open for these massive loopholes that allowed the danger to persist.
Yeah.
I was stunned by the Veritasium segment on the 1% rule. They talked about a company called W.R. Grace, aggressively lobbying regulators. Who were they, and what did they want?
W.R. Grace operated a massive vermiculite mine in Libby, Montana. Vermiculite is a mineral used in gardening soil and attic insulation. The problem was the vermiculite ore in Libby was naturally laced with deadly amphibole asbestos.
The jagged ones.
Right, so the company pushed regulators to adopt a threshold where any product containing less than 1% asbestos simply wouldn't be regulated as a hazardous material.
The human toll of that is staggering. W.R. Grace knew about the contamination, covered it up for 30 years, and an estimated 200 people in Libby, a town of just 3,000, died. Entire families were wiped out just from the invisible dust brought home on the miners' work clothes.
It's an absolute tragedy.
And because of that 1% rule they lobbied for, Grace was able to legally shift that contaminated Libby vermiculite all over the country to be used as attic insulation in millions of homes.
The scientific loophole that goes along with that 1% rule is perhaps even more dangerous. Legally, the government only recognizes 6 specific minerals as asbestos, but minerals don't care about human legal definitions. If a regulated asbestos fiber breaks apart into what geologists call a cleavage fragment, it legally doesn't count as asbestos anymore.
Wait, even if it's the exact same rock, just broken?
Exactly the same material. And scientific studies show that injecting these pure cleavage fragments into mice still makes them very sick. We are essentially regulating a legal word, not the biological reality of the rock.
That legal blind spot had catastrophic consequences during 9/11. When the World Trade Center towers collapsed, the steel frames had been coated in W.R. Grace's fireproof spray. It was pulverized into microscopic dust that covered lower Manhattan.
The EPA came in to test the air quality, but they used a method called polarized light microscopy, or PLM. PLM is fast and cheap, but it completely misses any fibers that are less than 1% by weight.
Because of that 1% rule.
Right. And more importantly, it simply cannot see the ultramicroscopic fibers that were pulverized in the collapse of those massive buildings. To see fibers that small, you need transmission electron microscopy, or TEM, which magnifies the sample up to 1,000,000 times.
Because they relied on the less sensitive PLM tests, the EPA went on national television and declared the air in New York City safe to breathe. But independent researchers who went in using the proper TEM method found incredibly dangerous levels of microscopic asbestos floating in that dust.
And the effects of that are still being felt.
Deeply. The ongoing tragedy is, as of 2023, nearly 6,800 registered ground zero workers have died from illnesses linked to that toxic exposure.
It is heartbreaking.
It really is. And that brings us to how this is still infiltrating our lives today. Because of these loopholes, asbestos keeps showing up where you least expect it. In 2017, testing found asbestos in Claire's makeup sparkly boxes and unicorn palettes marketed directly to little girls.
In makeup.
Yes, and it was found in Mickey Mouse crayons. And just recently, around 70 schools in Australia and New Zealand had to close because asbestos was found in the children's play sand. Why is a deadly carcinogen ending up in play sand and unicorn makeup?
It comes down to geological collocation. No one is intentionally putting asbestos in a makeup palette or a sandbox. It happens because harmless minerals, like the talc used in cosmetics or the vermiculite used in soil, naturally form in the earth right alongside those deadly amphibole asbestos veins.
So they just get mixed together in the earth.
Exactly. When mining companies scoop up the safe, profitable minerals, they often scoop up the deadly stuff right along with it. And because of those testing loopholes, it slips right into the supply chain. And it's not just consumer products slipping through the cracks, it's the natural environment itself. The geologists Brenda Buck and Rod Metcalf made a startling discovery just outside Las Vegas. They found naturally occurring asbestos spread across approximately 1 million acres of the desert.
And there were no abandoned mines there. It's just naturally occurring in the rocks, and as wind and erosion happen, it gets into the dirt. When the geologists tried to present these findings, the state of Nevada pushed back hard.
Oh, imagine they weren't thrilled.
No, they sent cease and desist letters because nobody wants a headline saying Vegas is covered in asbestos. The team actually went out to Nevada, strapped an air monitor to a dune buggy, and ripped donuts in a popular off-roading dry lake bed to test the exposure.
The lab results from that dry lake bed experiment were staggering. They found between 30 and 50 million asbestos structures per gram of mud. Just pulling your car off the side of the road and kicking up dust in that specific recreational area exposes you to incredibly high concentrations of a known carcinogen.
And there are no warning signs for the people who go camping or off-roading there.
None.
So what does this all mean for us globally? Well, in a lot of the world, they are still actively using it on an industrial scale. India imported over 350,000 tons of asbestos in 2019 alone. And in the U.S., the regulatory battle just keeps dragging on.
It's a very slow process.
Very slow. In 2016, the EPA was finally given new powers to restrict dangerous chemicals. But the source documents that progress completely stalled under the Trump administration. Donald Trump had publicly praised asbestos for years, calling it the greatest fireproofing material ever made. Regardless of politics, it demonstrates how shifting administrative priorities can directly halt environmental regulation.
It wasn't until 2024 that the U.S. finally enacted a new ban. But even that ban is severely limited in scope. It only covers one type, chrysotile asbestos, completely ignoring the other 5 types, including the jagged amphiboles. It gives some manufacturers a 12-year phase-out period, and it completely ignores the asbestos already sitting in our schools, our homes, and our natural environment.
So it's far from a complete fix.
Far from it. This raises an important question for you listening to this deep dive right now. What are you supposed to do with all this heavy information? The experts are very clear on this point. The goal is not to panic you. If you have asbestos in your ceiling right now, just sitting there undisturbed, you are likely perfectly fine.
Right.
The danger is strictly when the material is broken, pulverized, and becomes airborne.
Exactly. The takeaway is, don't go drilling into your vintage popcorn ceilings to see what's in there.
It's entirely about awareness, not fear. Think of it exactly like knowing if your house is in a flood zone or on an earthquake fault line. It's an environmental hazard, and having the information allows you to make informed decisions about your health, your home renovations, and even where you decide to kick up dust in the desert.
It is a profound realization to sit with. We live in a modern world that was literally built on the backs of miracle materials. And as we've seen today, the gap between scientific truth and legal definitions is often measured in human lives. We have an undeniably deadly material with a century of documented harm, and it is still lurking in our legal blind spots in our environment simply because of technicalities, loopholes, and economic momentum.
Is sobering.
It really leaves you with a thought to chew on long after this deep dive ends. If asbestos can hide in plain sight for this long, what modern miracle materials are currently being woven into the fabric of our daily lives right now, just waiting for the microscopes of tomorrow to reveal their true cost?
It is definitely something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.